They didn't know what they were holding. At first, the German soldiers thought it was some kind of compact American field radio, another bulky, unreliable Allied gadget that filled the air with static and drained its batteries in minutes. But when the Wehrmacht technicians powered it on and heard what came through clear, sharp, disciplined American voices, coordinating an entire battlefield through a device the size of a soldier's canteen, they froze. The room fell completely silent. One of the German signals officers muttered under his breath, "Das ist unmöglich." This is impossible, because in that moment they realized something terrifying. The Americans weren't just ahead in numbers, production, or firepower. They were 10 years ahead in battlefield communication, and Germany had never even noticed. The day the American Walkie-Talkie fell into German hands began like any other on the Western Front. The fog rolled thick across the Ardennes, clinging to the forest like a blanket, smothering the life out of every branch. In the distance, artillery thumped, steady as a heartbeat. The ground vibrated beneath the boots of the Wehrmacht patrol as they moved cautiously down a forest road that had been abandoned only hours earlier by retreating American troops. The German soldiers walked slowly, rifles raised, expecting mines, expecting booby traps, expecting anything except the discovery that would shake their confidence to the core. The first sign that something unusual had happened here was the half-rack still idling on the side of the road. It was riddled with bullet holes, yet its engine hummed like a stubborn machine refusing to die. Beside it lay scattered equipment, bandages, ammunition crates, and the body of a radio operator, whose hand still clutched a strap connected to a small, box-shaped device, half buried under mud. The German corporal nudged it with his boot, then bent down, brushing off dirt, his brow furrowed. It was small, far too small to be a radio. Radios were supposed to be huge, heavy, carried by two men or dragged across the battlefield like wounded animals. But this was different. He slung it into his sack, unaware that in doing so, he was carrying the most advanced infantry communications system the world had ever seen. Back at the German signals outpost, the air smelled of burning wires and cold cigarette smoke. Maps covered the walls. Radios crackled constantly, spewing bursts of static and clipped voices that dissolved into noise. German technology worked, but just barely. Their long-range radios were powerful yet unreliable. Their short-range sets were heavy and prone to fail, requiring batteries that never lasted long. Every message took effort, time, and luck to transmit. Communications were a battle of their own, so when the corporal delivered the captured strange device to the duty officers, they dismissed it at first. Another American toy. But the chief technician, a man named Hauptmann Weiss, had a habit of inspecting everything with a sharp, almost paranoid curiosity. His fingers traced the edges of the device, the smooth knobs, the firm antenna. "Fetch me batteries," he said quietly. When they finally powered it on, what came through wasn't static. It wasn't faint. It wasn't broken. It was crystal clear American speech flowing through the speaker, as if the man talking was standing right beside them. "Unit Baker, 5, adjust fire support. 200 meters west. Infantry push in 30 seconds. The Germans froze, clarity, range, power, all packed into a device no bigger than a loaf of bread. The room erupted. "This must be a field headquarters unit. No, impossible. The size is too small. How far could this reach? How many do they have?" Weiss suddenly felt something rare for him: fear. German doctrine had always taught that the Wehrmacht was the most advanced fighting machine in the world, a perfect blend of discipline, engineering, and innovation. But here was blunt, undeniable proof that the Americans had quietly leapfrogged them while Germany was scrambling to keep pace with tank designs, aircraft upgrades, and dwindling resources. They had not even considered that the Americans had mastered portable battlefield communication. And yet here it was. Weiss ordered static suppression tests, range estimations, signal strength mapping. Every test led to the same conclusion: the Americans had a battlefield advantage that Germany couldn't counter. With these handheld radios, squads miles apart moved as one organism. Artillery units could respond instantly. Tanks could coordinate with infantry in real time. Even retreating units could stay in communication without relying on messengers, flares, or risky wired telephones. For Germany, this was catastrophic. Word spread quietly through the German command, not publicly, never publicly. Morale was fragile as it was, but officers whispered about it during late night meetings about how entire American battalions seemed to react impossibly fast, how U.S. patrols moved like they knew exactly where the enemy was, how their artillery struck with surgical precision within minutes of being requested. Now the reason was obvious. The Wehrmacht had been relying on bulky torn Fu radios that weighed more than some machine guns. Signal interference rendered them unreliable. Batteries drained so quickly that many units didn't even bother carrying them, relying instead on runners, human beings sprinting under fire with written messages. But the Americans, their infantry carried communication power in their hands. This wasn't just technology. This was strategy revolutionized. Weiss wrote urgently to Berlin. If mass-produced, this device explains the enemy's unprecedented battlefield coordination. They are significantly ahead of us in portable communication design, at least 8 to 10 years. The report was stamped, filed, reviewed, and quietly pushed aside. Germany was crumbling, resources were gone, factories bombed, skilled workers drafted. Even if they wanted to copy the device, they couldn't. They simply didn't have the materials or the time. A war that once felt conquerable now felt like a race they had already lost. Meanwhile, on the American side, troops barely thought about their radios. To them, it was normal. Every squad had one, every soldier had used one, every commander depended on them. They didn't know the Germans had captured one. They didn't know the panic it created. They didn't know how it changed the enemy's perception of the war. In the snowy forests of the Ardennes, an American lieutenant named David Callahan held his walkie like a lifeline. To him, it was simply what kept his men alive. In the middle of an ambush, he would press the button and call for reinforcement. During artillery barrages, he adjusted fire. If his men got cut off, the first thing he checked was the radio. He trusted it more than anything. During one brutal firefight, his outnumbered squad was nearly overrun. German machine gun nests pinned them down. Mortars shook the ground. Callahan hit the transmit button so hard his thumb went numb. "We need fire support." Now, within moments, American artillery thundered from behind the trees, tearing through German positions, sending shrapnel ricocheting across the frozen ground. The Germans scattered, not understanding how the Americans could respond so precisely, so quickly. Callahan and his surviving men withdrew. As they fell back, one soldier was hit and dropped the radio. The strap tore. The device slid into the mud. That was the one the Germans found. The war surged onward. Thousands died. Cities burned. Borders shifted. Tanks advanced and retreated through mud and snow and blood. But behind the chaos, Germany's technological confidence had taken a quiet but deadly blow. They had believed themselves superior. They had believed themselves invincible, but the Walkie-Talkie proved something else. The Americans had out-innovated them, not with a new tank, not with a new gun, not with a new bomb, but with a simple, rugged handheld radio that changed how soldiers fought, moved, lived, and survived. Wehrmacht soldiers who later used the captured device during tests felt something strange. Jealousy. The Americans could call help instantly. Germans had to rely on hope. The Americans could coordinate ambushes. Germans had to improvise. The Americans could stay in communication across forests, across ruins, across fog, choked battlefields. Germans shouted to each other over explosions and wind. The difference was devastating. In the final months of the war, as Germany collapsed under the pressure of 3 fronts, Weiss returned to his notes, flipping through pages of failed attempts to replicate the American device. He knew the war was lost, but what frightened him most wasn't the American tanks or bombers or warships. It was the moment he had heard that first crystal, clear American voice through a device that weighed less than a helmet. That was when he knew Germany hadn't just lost the war on the battlefield. They had lost it in the laboratories, the factories, the workshops. Long before the shooting even started, the Americans had leap-frogged them silently, efficiently, methodically. Weiss wrote one final note before abandoning the outpost. If they had this at the beginning of the war, we never stood a chance. On the battlefield of the Ardennes, months later, the snow melted. Spring pushed through the dead branches, and buried deep in the mud, forgotten beneath debris and shattered trees, the original Walkie-Talkie still lay where Callahan had dropped it, its battery dead, its casing dented, but its legacy carved permanently into the history of warfare. Because it wasn't just a radio, it was a warning. Technology wins wars long before the first shot is fired. And on that freezing winter morning, when the Wehrmacht held an American walkie-talkie in their gloved hands and realized they were 10 years behind, the war in a way none of them understood yet was already over.